When there's no microphone, so I'm going to try and speak as loud as I can. My wife always tells me I've got a mellow voice, and that's good sometimes, but not all the time. But anyway, when I got the contact to be the speaker, I thought, oh boy, this is the kickoff for this year, and I don't know if I was the right choice to do this, but I'm going to do the best I can. When you try to take 80 plus years out of my life and try to put that together today, I mean, I had notes and notes and notes and notes and notes, and even today I was told we have to cut it back a little bit more, so I'm not going to take any more time with that. But let me just say this as a little bit of a background, is that I came from a conservative Christian background. My my grandfather came from Germany. He was a believer when he came to the States. My mother, her background is from Belgium, which again was conservative Christian when she came. How did they meet? I mean, you got 420 miles between Wausau and Danville, Illinois, for a Bible study. Why would anybody do 420 miles to go to a Bible study, or to a Bible conference, I should say? But that's where my parents met. That kind of stuff still is happening today. I was 7 years old when World War II broke out, and I don't remember a lot about that, but I remember a lot about the end of World War II. But while I was on the farm for about 2 years with my dad, I learned how to milk cows and do the other stuff, which you know what that is. We got a call from Danville, Illinois. That's where my mother is from. And my grandfather, who was a coal miner, had a heart attack in the coal mine. And I said, it's 420 miles from Wausau down to Danville, Illinois. It's a long trip with an old car, I'm sure. Anyway, in those days, a lot of people didn't have the funds to have a funeral at a funeral home. So in this case, my grandfather's viewing was in the house where he lived. There was a lot of people that came to that funeral because my grandfather also spoke at the church there in Danville. Where did Roger end up that night? Next to the coffin all night long. I'm laying there, the coffin is here. It's like, what are these people thinking? I'm a 9-year-old kid, but at the same time, I think God had a purpose in that, because I've got to find out what death was all about at a 9-year age. Well, I'm not saying I had everything going at that time, but my grandmother then came to Wausau on the farm, and she pinned me down in bed one night. I slept with my grandmother. There was no room anyplace else. And she pressed me for my salvation. You know where your grandpa's going? I said, yeah, I think so. Well, do you know if you know where you're going there? And I said, I don't know. So she really pressed the salvation story to me in bed that night. I'm not saying that I had total assurance at that time, but I still go back to that night when my grandmother was in bed with me and said, Roger, you need to make a decision. And I still look at that. I'm going to have to skip ahead here a little bit. Pretty soon, before you know it, it's graduation. I graduated from now which is called Wausau East. And at that time, the Korean War was going pretty strong. A lot of guys didn't finish high school. They fudged their age, and they ended up going into the Army at that time. I did graduate. I was a pretty good student. I could have been a better student, but at least I had B's. So that isn't so bad. So there was a strange thing going on, because I had a cousin that was a bit older than me, and he wanted to go to the Army, and I didn't think I wanted to go. But anyway, I told my folks about this, and they were not happy about this, but he drags me into the draft office. It's about right where Shepherd and Shaler is. That's where the draft office was. And we sort of committed to going to the Army. I told my folks that they were not happy. But I want to say right away, my dad always stood behind me through my whole life. My dad always stood behind me. So we did go. We were enlisted, and we went to Fort Leonard Wood for 16 weeks. And let me tell you, when you come from a sheltered life, and then you're thrown into this kind of an atmosphere, this era, it is a tough deal. I mean, it was tough, and I probably melted down just a little bit, but not much. After that 16 weeks, I was good enough, I guess, to go to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, which is engineer school. So I did that. I had a story that went with that, but there's no time to talk about that today. But after engineer school, I ended up going to Germany, which was in Karlsruhe, Germany. I was kind of fortunate. I was what they call the TINE. It was a Troop Information and Education person. I knew how to run a 60-millimeter projector, which nobody else seemed to know. I had driven my dad's semi-truck, which was half the size of what they are today, but I knew how to do that. I had a good MO. So I had a good position in the Army at that time, and I've been thankful for that because it was, it could have been a lot worse. But at the same time, I was a driver for a deuce and a half, if you know what that is. That's a 6-wheel drive, 2.5-ton truck. And one of my experiences, and I'm shaking right now because I think about that, is that we had maneuvers, we had to cross the Rhine River, and I'm driving this deuce and a half on a floating bridge, and it's very narrow. And the current is pretty tough. It's pretty tough. But anyway, I made it through. But it's one of those times that I was not too sure of myself at that time. Skipping ahead, during this time, my dear wife, Grace, she was 15 and I was 18, I guess, and there was a wedding in Medford, Wisconsin. And my dad got to go there because he had a movie camera, and everybody didn't have movie cameras, so he was the movie projector guy. And so there was a girl serving the meal that night, something like this, in a church, and I seen this gal, and I said, "Whoa, I wonder if that could be the one." She's 15, I'm 18, it didn't make sense. But anyway, from that time on, there was not too many weeks before I was going to the service, but I made sure there was some times I could get to Medford. She was in high school at that time. So we did get together a few times, but it was always in a group setting. It never was, or just us. We never dated, in other words. It was always in a group setting. But anyway, I wish I had a picture of her too, but I'm going to say this right now. In 2012, I'm looking through my photographs that I took in the Army, and I said, "Grace, I'm a little bit confused about some of the dates in here." And she said, "Well, I got your letters." I said, "What?" She said, "I got every letter that you wrote to me." It's not this big of a deal, but anyway, I'm going to show you this. This contains 332 letters that I wrote to my wife while I was in service. 332. If we put those together in this book, exactly 10 years ago. So if you want a diary of what was happening with me for 2 years, it's in that book. But I had to tell you this because she's home praying for me right now. I mean, she knows I don't do a lot of this, but I do. So it was time to come home, and that's where probably my biggest part of my little talk today is. I came home, and my dad expected me to be part of the business, and during that time when I was in Fort Belvoir, I was struggling with what do I do when I get out of the service. I didn't know what I should do, what's a good thing for me to do. So when I left for Germany, I had a little talk with him. He had a talk with me. Again, I want to say he always stood behind me. No matter if I goofed up, he was always there for me. I need to press that because as a Christian, a young man, it's very important to have a father who's with you all the time. I kind of told him, I said, "Dad, I don't know. I see you, I'm working real hard. I'm going to be gone 16 months. I don't know if I want to come back to the business." I don't know how much that hurt him. I don't know how much that hurt him, but I'm sure it hurt him. Well, guess what? Exactly 1 month after I get to Germany, my dad puts a car on a ship on the United States, a cruiser, and he comes to Europe to see me. Now, we did have relatives in Germany, but I don't know if he came to recruit me, to be sure, or whether he came to just visit, but he stayed there a whole month. But even during that month, he kept coming back to the base to check on me. And I did have a few days off with him. I did not make any commitment to him at that time. I didn't know. I kind of lose track of this time, and I don't know if I could find out. But my relationship with Grace was getting more and more, and I'm thinking, what if the Lord leads us to getting married? What am I going to do? First, I thought as a young kid, I'd like to run a gas station. That seemed like a lot of fun, but I really didn't have anything strong. So I wrote to my dad and I said, I'm changing my mind. I think I want to come back to the business. He said, son, you don't know this, but I sold the store. But the financing went through. So the store was still there. So that was kind of interesting. I have to jump ahead a little bit here to 1956. I'm doing okay, I think. The store is doing very well. The 2 lots that my dad purchased at that time were empty lots, and so that was easy. He could build 2 buildings, 46 and 48. But now the business was growing. And I have to tell you this because I almost forgot this, but my sister's husband was Emil Rochetto. Steve is not here, I don't think. Or my son Tim should be here, but they know all this stuff. Oh, they hear me again. But anyway, my dad talked Emil Rochetto into leaving the teaching business and coming into the business. So the 2 of us became my dad's proteges. We started running the business. He was taking more and more time off. So again, I'm going to push ahead, but at some point in the late 50s, early 60s, we have no space. Our business is growing. No place to go. Well, we purchased 1 house on 3rd Avenue and moved it. It's still on 3rd Avenue, but it's way north on 3rd Avenue. But that wasn't very much. That was one lot. But between 1959 and 1965, we purchased 4 residential properties on 2nd Avenue. Now, that's a big deal because you can't just say, I'll give you $50,000 and they take it. I mean, you got to go through a lot of negotiations. 3 of those 4 houses were demolished to the bottom. There was nothing left. 1 was saved, and that's on 1st Avenue or 2nd Avenue. I got to think. Anyway, so that made room for us to grow because the business was growing. No box stores in town at that time, so we had a sporting goods store inside the hardware store. We had hockey, we had golf, we had tennis, we had camping, we had ammo, we had guns. We had all this stuff, and the business kept growing. Now the box stores come in, and they start taking a hold of some of these departments, and so we kind of eliminated all those sporting goods areas, and we grew the hardware business. Okay, the hardware business was doing good, and we continued to expand, and we built on. There's a lot of warehouse additions that we did out in Town of Maine, which was a big help because it allowed us to put a lot of appliances out there. This is going to be hard for me. 1981, my brother-in-law, my best friend, my mentor, and he was more than that. I was in Florida, my dad's condo. Had a severe heart attack. It was so severe that he lost his mental abilities. Physically, he was pretty good. At that time, they tried everything to do to get him back to some kind of a normal state, but he never did make it back. 15 months later, he died at home in bed. No, the problem already started when he passed away because he's not there for me anymore. I got 2 sons that are young and too young to really take a lot of responsibility. They were department type of people, but not management. From 81 to 85, I was not a good husband. I was not a good father. I spent way too much time at that store, not just 6 days a week, but 7 days a week and nights. If it wouldn't have been for Grace, on a normal situation, she would have said, see ya, you're not here for me anymore. That was tough. But God was always there. And I think he knew what I had to do at that time in order to keep the business rolling and going at the same time. In 1982, kind of strange, Living Waters Bible Camp asked me to be on the board of directors, which I did do. I said, why are you guys asking me this? I just don't think I can do this. I'm too busy. Well, I think God's maybe calling you. You need a person like you on our board, and we don't have any business people, and you should be one of those. So I said, okay. So I did that. On 85, I was to the point that I could not handle what was going on anymore. So I told my dad, I got to go. He was not a happy camper. How do you take a going business and tell your dad that I can't do this anymore? It was tough. So we sold the store. Within months, I knew things weren't right. I knew things were not going to be right during that time. But in 86, the board asked me to become administrator. I said, being on the board's enough. I don't need to do more than this. Well, we need you to kind of administrate until we get somebody else. And I said, okay. I said, okay. I knew things at home, and I did half my time at camp and half my time at home. Well, I had this energy to do something for the camp, so I decided to put a slide projection, a slide presentation together. Phil Book helped me with that. Put some music to it. So I ended up traveling through 6 states, presenting Living Waters Bible Camp. It was great getting away and doing stuff for the camp, and it was a reprieve for me to be able to do that. But you know, it was still hard. I mean, my heart was back in Wausau for a lot of that time, but it was a great time. I got to meet some people that I never knew before, and hopefully that 3 years that I did this had some value to the camp at that time. Now it's 1989. Things are not going well at the store. I knew that from people in the neighborhood. I knew it from customers. And I said, Roger, what are you going to do about this? And I said, yeah, I know. I mean, I probably made a big mistake, or we made a big mistake in 1985. By the way, my sister started in that business when she was 16, and she did most of the bookwork when she was 16. I was 3 years behind, so I was 13 at that time. So at that point, she was also fired from the job. My son Tim was fired from the job about a year after. I stayed on for a few months, and I said, I got enough of this. I can't handle what Grebe is all about. So she got fired, or she left one or the other. So now 89 is here. He wants us to buy the store back. And I'm thinking, Jack, you're going to leave me with this mess? The store was a mess, and I mean a mess. Not only inventory-wise, but the floor, the lights, the inventory. Talk about a business that was gone. It was gone. There was nothing left. And a lot of people said, your name's on the building, Roger, what we can do about this, you know, because we agreed to let the name stay on the building during this time. So the night that we were to take over, I changed locks, and he pressed me to have locks changed that night. This guy right here was one that watched the store that night, Mike. Mike got deterred that night, but we caught up to him at Holiday Inn at that time. And I know that he was stealing stuff out of the store that night at midnight, because that's the day at 12:01, it's our store, not his. But I know that he was in the store after 12 o'clock. What he put on his big town car, I don't know. But we stopped him. He said, well, go get a court order. And so we couldn't do that. So the next morning, I walk in. He approaches me, and he said, you must have a lot of sway over the police department. I said, police department's a police department. I got nothing to do with the police department. You know, I said, Jack, you know what you're doing, what you're not doing. You know, that's something that you're going to have to live with. It was hard to testify to him a little bit. Anyway, now I had this store, and now what we're going to do with it. It just, where do I start? I don't know where to start. So first thing we started cleaning the light bulbs, cleaning the floor, getting the floor lined up, and trying make it look like a different place, you know. And eventually, of course, we did a lot of things to make it look a lot better. But I was stuck on how to do this. I've never had a business that was going good that went to the pots, and now I got to take it back. What do you do? How do you do this? Some of you might know this name. His name was Bart Kellenhauser. He was a man that started as a radio salesman, and he ended up as a part owner of Channel 7. I said, Bart, I need to talk to you. He said, what do you got? He was a very short kind of a guy, and just tell me what you need. We'll get it done. So I met him downtown for breakfast, and I said, how do I tell people that this is past and now it's a new thing? He said, it's simple. I said, okay, you tell me. He said, just tell them Grebe's is Grebe's again. And that's what we did for many, many months. We just said, Grebe's is Grebe's again. So consequently, that's what happened in 1989. Steve was still in Minneapolis, and we were trying to get him to come. That would be his dad that passed away. And so finally in 1994, Steve came to the store and is there now and one of the main cogs. I like to put it this way. You know, on a train, there's an engine in the front, then the passenger cars, and there's a caboose. Well, Steve and Tim are the engine, and I'm the caboose. But it's the people in between that make it work. That's what makes it work. So in 1995, we had the possibility to buy out a first business, and it was John Book's brother Paul. So we bought the business in 1995, and that made us really quite evident in the power equipment business. We needed a business like that to grow. And so in 1995, we were able to pick up all of the lines that we needed to make this business grow. So that was 1995. As the box stores grew, I'm doing pretty good. I'm going to go back and tell you the story. The box stores grew, and we have to keep changing our mode of retail business. One of those was, can you believe, get rid of the hardware business. When I was a kid, there was 4 hardware stores downtown Wausau. I can name each one of them. Nickel, Hardware, Cell, and Weekman. That's where they were. When my dad started, they didn't like it at all. And they would not help him with anything. Those 4 kind of stuck together like we are the 4 downtown. My dad was on his own by himself. So, big decision what to do. We labored and prayed about what to do. We actually went north of Wausau quite a ways and took a couple of people with us to help us decide how to do this. How do we exit the hardware business and tell people that we're not going out of business? Because a couple of competitors of ours were looking for that opportunity to say, that these guys are going to go. That's just the beginning. They're on the way out. Well, we're not on the way out. We're on the way in, and we're going to grow. So we made that decision. So that was in 2005 that we actually exited the business. We sold the products that we had in the store at very big discounts because we only had so much time to convert the store over to what we wanted to do. By the way, in the meantime, we had built a plumbing store. We had 8 plumbers working for us at one time. So we had to convert that building, tell them to move out because we sold that to the employees. Okay, if you can follow this, but we sold that plumbing business to employees. Well, now we needed that building for the power center, okay? And that's actually what happened. That was if you were to talk to Harvey Niemeyer right now, he'd tell you that was the hardest thing in my life because they had to move out of the building and go back into the Book building, which is 2 or 3 blocks away. It was kind of a crazy time. But anyway, in 2005, we ended up with the power center in our store. It's been good since then. 1996. I got it right. 1996 was a tough, tough year. In January of 96, my dad passed away in Florida. He was still bright up here, but he contracted a cold, and it kept getting worse and worse and worse, till finally he passed away in Florida. He had so many friends in Florida, because he was a resident there now, that we had to have a funeral in Florida, because people wanted to be there for the family, so we did that. But we had to have a funeral in Wausau, right? So a funeral in Wausau, another big funeral for my dad. March 96. My son is a missionary in the Bahamas. Had been there since 86, about 10 years. Little Amberly, 22 months old, happens to fall into a small pond that's on the property. She drowns there in that pool. He's serving God. He takes his 22-month-old baby away from us, Big funeral in Nassau, Bahamas, because people knew him from being there for 10 years. There's more stories behind that. Why would God take this 22-month-old little kid? But a lot of positive things happened because of that drowning. Unbelievable. So another funeral in Wausau, 2 months after my dad passed. So they had 4 funerals already, right, in that first year. Now comes August, and Grace's father passes away in his sleep. So that was our 50th year in business, and I had put tons of time into making the 50th year something extra and special. My dad never got to enjoy that 50th year. And so we kept it going, but there was always this thing between my dad and Amberly and her dad that we just didn't have the energy, just didn't have the goal that it would take to make this really work well. So 96 was a hard year because of what I just mentioned. But you can't stop, right? No, I know I talked about 105 already, but 96, these are things that happened in 96 and 05. Last year was a banner year for our store. I don't know how or why that happened. With COVID and everything else, I give a lot of credit to the engine, which is Steve and Tim, and their 2 wives, can't forget Debbie and Susie, because they are very involved in that business. Those 4 is what makes it go today. What makes it go. I check in, check this, check that, check the vehicles, check the roof, check the parking lot, check stuff. But that's what I do, I check. I don't have to do much work anymore. Anyway, the reason why we did well is because whenever a product became available, we'd buy it. I'd say, what are you guys doing? You got all this stuff, the warehouse is full, the parking lot's full. Well, we never know when we're going to get it again, so we have to buy it now. And so we have to rent a warehouse in order to put all this stuff away because there's no place to go with it. And we have a warehouse that's been added to twice, and that there's no room, But if they hadn't done that, we probably would have not had that kind of a year. This is the new year, we'll see. But getting product at that time last year we're still getting stuff that we ordered a year ago, it's still coming in right now. I guess before I forget, I can tell you one story. I just might say, we had 4 kids. Tim was the oldest. We had twins, a boy and a girl. That's always an interesting situation, a boy and girl twins. It's just a very special thing to do. And then the 4th was Lisa, that's Ramon's wife over here. Then we had 14 grandkids, which is not that big of a deal, I guess, for some people. But guess what? We had 27 great-grandkids. That's what we have, and there's one on the way. And some of you don't know that yet, but so that's going to be 28. And we got 3 or 4 grandkids that are not married yet, and a couple that are married but they haven't had any yet. So where this number is going, we really don't know. And as you know, we had 66 years this last September 8th, I think it is. Yeah, I always want to say the 7th was the 8th. One thing I can't forget either before I tell you one story, and that is my sister passed away, I think, in 2019. I was looking at that today, and I didn't find time to, but I think it was in November of 2019 that she passed away, so it's going to be 4 years coming up. But she was very influential in that business because she held the purse strings. I mean, she held them. It was hard to get money out of her to do stuff. I always had to beg and treat her with something, get some money out to do something, but some of you know that. But she was good because she watched every penny that went in or went out of the store. I mean, it was some of you people know that. She was very tight with that. And she saved us a lot of money simply by just watching stuff and making sure people paid their bills. If they didn't, she was on the phone, So she did her thing. She wasn't the right person always on the floor, but she was very good at doing what she had to do. I can't forget that. I forgot to tell you that when I got to Germany, a few days after, my dad buys me a 1949 VW. He buys me a car in Germany. I don't know the language. I don't know the rules of the road. I need to get a license. I'm thinking to myself, what are you thinking, Dad? Think about that. Why would he buy me a car in Germany when I'm in the Army, Well, I'll tell you what, there's two things, maybe. He put a lot of confidence in me that I would behave myself with that car, but it's a dangerous thing for a guy 20 years old to have a car and be able to do things you probably shouldn't do. And I did one thing I shouldn't do. Maybe I should tell you that one. Some of you have heard that one before, but maybe not. But anyway, there was a family in Frankfurt, Germany, that hosted GIs when they were there. And they would take care of them and there was a church there, an assembly of believers, and it was 85 miles away. So if I wanted to go there, I'd have to travel 85 miles up to Frankfurt, Germany, to go to that church and to be with that family. So that was one thing he was thinking about. But there was also a friend of mine who was 3 years ahead of me. His name was Paul. And he lived close, or he was stationed close to Frankfurt. And I think he thought he would be a good mentor to me because he was 3 years older, and he would kind of do a check on me a little bit. And so we got together a number of times where he was actually checking on me, and we did some travels together up in northern Germany. Another story. I think I've covered that part now. Okay, the car. I'll tell you about something about the car. I had 3 buddies with me. It was on a Saturday night, and we were just kind of cruising around. I had our lunch, and he said, one of them said, "I hear that this is this prohibited area for people, especially for U.S. Personnel, and it's a restricted area. It's a red light area." And so we went there, and we seen the sign, "Don't enter here." But one of them said to me, "Well, Grebe, you just drive through. We won't stop and see what it's like in this area." So I did that. And at the end of the 2 blocks, guess who was sitting there? An MP. And he's kind of parked like this. There was just enough space to get around him. Guess what I did? I flew around the MP, and I lost them. They were sitting outside the Jeep. By the time they got in the Jeep, I was gone. Now, this was a 25 horsepower rear engine, air-cooled VW. And I'm going like this all the way through. And I got back to the camp and I said, I won the war. Until next morning, my first sergeant called me in along with the commander. And he said, "Grebe, you own a green Opel?" And the answer was, "No, I don't own a green Opel." Well, he says, "Is your license number 4C? It starts that way and then it ends up something else." I said, "Yes, sir." "What were you doing in off limits last night?" I said, "Sir, it was somebody else that wanted me to go through there." I was driving, but it was somebody else that had the idea, And they reminded me what the cost of that would have been for me in terms of penalties, maybe stocking, I don't know. But the thing is, I had a very good report with them with regard to my conduct. In fact, I ended up with a good conduct model, believe it or not. But that sort of got me through that one with God's help, because I was plenty nervous about what could happen to me on that one. Okay. Anyway, that was one story. The other one you're going to get a big kick out of. I'm in Fort Belvoir, and if you gave a pint of blood, you could get a 3-day pass. So that's a great thing. So I did my blood, and I took off for Wausau, Wisconsin from Belvoir. You're supposed to leave within 100 miles, I think, and I was maybe 1,000 miles away, I don't know. And everything went well until it was time to leave. And it was bad weather at old Wausau Municipal Airport at that time, bad weather. So called Green Bay, said, no, you can get here, but there's no seat for you. So my dad says, why don't you call Minneapolis? So I call Minneapolis, and yeah, the plane's leaving at 10 o'clock, if you can get here by 10 o'clock. So he calls a friend who knows where the airport is. My dad takes off for Minneapolis on a ride that you would not believe. I wrote down in here, that was 100 miles an hour that he was going. And when he got to Abbotsford or some of these cities, he went through stop signs, he went through red lights, he did everything to get me there on time. I'm in St. Paul. My mother says, she's in the back seat, you know. And I'm not sure how this is going to end up. My dad says, it's too late. We're not going to be able to do this. And she said, you never know. The plane might be late. So guess what he does? Snaps it down, flies into Minneapolis at the airport, drops me off at the gate. I have no ticket because the tickets had not been changed. And I said, I tried to get on, in Green Bay. I said, no, and Milwaukee was out and so on. Well, I said, is your dad there? Yeah. I said, I'm sure that he'll pay for the ticket. Just let me on. Well, they said, I think the door's closed. And I said, well, let's give it a try. So they had me jump over the ticket counter. I jumped over the ticket counter, got to the fence. I'm trying to open this fence. It's just me, nobody else, to help me. I finally realized that it's a gate that slides. It's not one that opens. And so I run up to the plane. The door is closed. The steps were just being removed. Why the door was not locked, I don't know. So I cranked on. No security checks. I had my uniform on. That helped. I opened the door, and the lady, the attendant said, well, she said. And I said, yeah, I got to get on this plane. Otherwise, I'm going to be AWOL, So anyway, she said, well, find a seat someplace. I think she's not happy with me at that time. So I found a seat. Guess we stopped in Chicago, stopped in Detroit, got into D.C. at 6-something in the morning, or maybe close to 7. I'm actually AWOL. I walk into the orderly room, and of course they knew who I was right away. And they said, soldier, you know that you're AWOL. But I was only about 5 minutes. It was just, it was that close to actually being AWOL. And they said, report back here at 1700 hours, which is like 5 o'clock. Well, my platoon sergeant, I told him I was leaving for Wausau, Wisconsin, and would he cover for me through the night at least? And he said, Grebe, I know you, it's okay, I'll cover for you, but I can't cover you at class time. If you're not there at class time, you're AWOL, okay? So the day goes by, and I said, Sarge, what do you think? You think I should report back to the office or just take a chance? He said, if I was you, I'd take a chance. So I took a chance. They never came after me. But I was AWOL. Basically, I was AWOL at that time. But I think of God being a part of my faith, and I prayed plenty about what's going on here, what's not going on here. So at that point, those are two stories out of many that have been pretty interesting for me, and I look back at those, and it's in this book, so it's not that I'm just telling you a story. I actually told my girlfriend at that time what was going on, and of course I don't know what she thought about this guy doing all this stuff. But anyway, I think my time is probably close to being up. Any questions I can answer for you? I mean, God's been good to us as a family, and I'm presently serving on the executive board of American Legion. That's been a new experience for me, and I've been doing that for a couple of years now. Didn't expect to do that, but I'm doing that. Number 2, I'm with LEAP, which is Law Enforcement Appreciation Project. If there's any officers here, you know what that is. But we collect funds up until about $4,000 or $5,000, and then we issue $25 gift certificates to every police officer in Marathon County. Every single one that gets a $25 gift. And we're ready to make another distribution. We usually call Channel 7 or Channel 9 and kind of do kind of a big thing at one time. The other thing is I've been involved with the Joseph Project. That's Ron Johnson's founding, and that is to bring homeless people into Bible studies and prepare them for their job the next day. So I've been an interviewer for the Joseph Project for about, since it began, 4, 5, 6 years ago, I think. You know, one's coming up this Thursday night. I'm going to be there, and I don't know who I'm going to interview, but I love interviewing one at a time because I get a chance to share my faith with them, and when I'm with somebody else, it's not as easy to do. I've also been working at the shelter since 2016. I don't know about this year, but I've been volunteering on Monday nights since 2016. So I keep busy. I enjoy my home. I enjoy my yard, but I'm finding a lot of satisfaction giving back to the community, which has been so very, very good to us in so many different ways. Sometimes you wish you could do more.